Dr. Rhonda Glover Reese. You started as a receptionist, is that right, with the FBI right out of college?
Yeah, well, it is a telephone operator,
Okay, a
switchboard operator.
telephone operator. I see.
Yes.
Right, right. Just walk it. Excellent. Well, we're excited to chat with you today. And Dana, would you do a little introduction?
Dr. Reese is a highly accomplished international speaker, best-selling author, an instructor, and founder of a program called Noble Youth. And she is a certified law enforcement coach, certified professional career coach, and certified youth parent and family coach. She's been doing this work for about 8 years now, and we want to hear more about that. But part of what we're driven today is mostly to talk about your prior experience, which is very intriguing. 34 years with the FBI. And I think that took you not only in Washington, D.C., where you spent time growing up there and worked there, but I think it took you up to like New York and even into my home territory of New England, if I'm not mistaken. While at the FBI, she earned what's called the FBI Trilogy Award. And we're so excited to have you here today. Maybe you can explain that award a little bit before we kind of get into the content. But we thank you for your service in helping keep our country safe.
Yes, and we gotta take her from the switchboard, the operator, up to the position she ultimately got to.
So, well, I tell you, working for the FBI 34 years it was amazing. But I started on the switchboard. And back then when I started with the FBI in 1984. And I knew that I wanted to become an agent when I was a little girl. I wanted to be an FBI agent. From my exposure to the program, the FBI with Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. And so back then, when you applied to the FBI in an administrative role, the FBI did not tell you what you were going to do. You were either going to be a clerk or clerk typist or something around that space, but you didn't know where you were going to be assigned. And so I applied to take the typing test. I failed. And so I could only apply for clerk positions. And so when I had my orientation to start at the FBI, it was 3 days of learning about the FBI, learning about insurance, learning about the structure of the FBI, the organization. That was it. And so on that third day, a woman came to escort me to where I was going to start my position. Still didn't know what I was going to be doing. And I'm all excited. I knew the division I was going to, which was Division 8. And I remember asking someone, what's Division 8? And they said, oh, that's where all the computers are. I'm like, okay, I can do that. Well, this woman, she came, she escorted me. She's very prim, very proper, hair, just incredibly just neat and coiffed, and her dress was just so neat, and she was just very, very, very prim and proper. So she sits me down in a conference room, and she proceeds to tell me, welcome to the FBI. You're assigned to the switchboard. And I'm like, the switchboard? She says, yes, the switchboard. I said, the switchboard? She said, yes. And I had to ask one more time because I was not sure I heard her say that. The switchboard. Yes. She says, yes. Didn't anyone tell you? I said, no. And so while I'm going through that, I'm fighting tears. I'm fighting tears. I had just graduated college. I had my college degree. I was all excited. I'm ready to take on the world. All my family, my friends, they knew I wanted to be an agent, even though I don't recall talking about it a whole lot, but they remember that. And they knew I was starting to work at the FBI. And they knew. And I'm like, how am I going to tell my family? How am I going to tell my friends? I can't tell them I'm working on a switchboard. I can't do that. So while I'm sitting in that room, I am thinking about my exit plan because I'm saying to myself, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back. Just like that. I'm like, I'm not coming back. And so she saw the distress in my face. And I kept it together because I was fighting tears. And she said, well, let me just take you into the switchboard so you could start training. So I sat down in this area, and I mean, it was a true switchboard. The the banks of phones and the plugs. It was a switchboard. And so I took the opportunity to call my mother, and I called my mother and I said, Ma, they put me on the switchboard, and this is where I experienced my shift. My mother said to me, well, someone must have heard your voice and thought you would be good on the switchboard. And so that is when I experienced my switch. And when my mother said that, I sat differently and I told myself that I was going to learn everything that I could about the FBI switchboard. And that's what I did. Because had I showed up differently, everybody that I worked with and surrounded me in that switchboard would know that I was not happy. I did not want to be there. But I'm like, no, I'm going to learn everything I can about the switchboard. And so I showed up enthusiastic and really driven and wanting to learn. So much so, I worked every shift, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work every shift because every shift experienced different things. Different people called at different times. So I had the opportunity at that time to get to know the top executives in the FBI. So much so that I would see myself in their offices. I would just walk up to their offices and sit down and chat with them. And so you can't do that kind of stuff now because everything's on lockdown. But then I was able to go up and sit in their offices and sit and talk and learn and learn. And so I was on the switchboard for about a year and year and a half. And then I started to go up. I became a photographer. And then from that role, I was promoted to a position in New York in the Special Surveillance Group. And then from that position, I applied to become an agent. And that was in September 1988. I went to Quantico and started my FBI career as an FBI agent. So I shared that story. It took a long time for me to really be able to share that story because of the shame that I felt. And but then later on, I realized, it was years later, I realized that telling my story would help somebody, particularly young people, to understand that there's no shame to entry level. There is no shame to just getting your foot in the door. Because I learned while I was on the switchboard that it was the zenith of activity. Everything went through the switchboard. All calls went through the switchboard. If anybody needed to make a long distance phone call, call overseas, or they needed to have a conference call, it was set up by the switchboard. And so people got to know me and I got to know them. And I felt comfortable picking up the phone and asking questions. And I took advantage Yes, I did. I took advantage of that. I took that opportunity to get to know them, to ask questions, to learn as much as I could about the FBI. And that experience really continued to have me go higher in the Bureau. So I'm grateful for that. I'm really grateful for my mother for being right there for me to help me see that being in that position, she's like, yeah, you got that voice.
Well,
I heard your voice.
yeah, that's a marvelous story,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I know it. I'm sure it took you years to kind of realize that there's value in how you started those first 4 years, and
Yes.
at a level where it was beneath you, really. And
Mm-hmm.
yet your mom's reframing of this, and this is
Yes.
good for, I think, entry level people today, where there's lots of challenges in getting going. Recent college grads and so forth trying to find new work, new
Mm,
first time jobs. Lots of
yeah.
challenges. They're going to have to get more creative. But your mom's reframing that from, the way she did to like accentuating the positive, I think was incredible. And it sounded like that was your transformational moment as you realized,
Right.
I have a skill that somebody saw that I could take advantage of. And then
Oh,
learning, I'm sure, the communications part, and then being comfortable with talking with high level people at that age. Incredible story, really, of blessings that came out of something that you did not ever anticipate. And then you
oh,
went on and
absolutely.
had a huge career with the FBI, ended up, I think, tell us about that, how you went through, the work that you did, and then how you ended up training in leadership and development a lot of other agents.
Oh, well, so for me, leadership, I love leadership. Oh my gosh, I just love learning about it because I have experienced highs and lows in my own leadership journey. I really paid attention to my leaders, to my supervisors. I paid attention to the things that they did, the things that they didn't do that I know that they should have done because of my access, because I took advantage. And I don't want anyone to walk away when I say take advantage, like using people. Let me just say opportunity. I took the opportunity to get to know people and get to know leaders in the FBI and really understand how they show up. And I remember how some of those leaders made me feel. And so I was able to take from those experiences and use them as my own. It was when people talk about put it in your toolbox. Yes, you put it in your tool. My toolbox was so big, I just had to drag it. There was no carrying it. It was just dragging it throughout my 34 career because I met so many people and I learned so much. I really, really did. And so in the bureau, I had the opportunity to really take on leadership roles, learning more about leadership, learning about what type of leader I wanted to be. And so I had the opportunity to teach throughout throughout my career. And I know you mentioned the FBI leader. FBI leader is that is something that started, it was born out of the FBI, but it is a separate component now. FBI leader is separate. So it has a relationship with the FBI, but it's different. And LEADA is the Law Enforcement Executive Development Association. That's what LEADA stands for. And so I'm an instructor with LEADA. And so I teach leadership through LEADA. And so there were 3 courses that I had to take in order to get that Trilogy award. So that's where that Trilogy award, I recently received that. Now, while I have received numerous awards in the FBI, I received the Director's Award for equal employment opportunity, and I was just so proud to get that. I am just as proud now to be a part of LEADA, because it has a positioned me to engage with other law enforcement, because FBI LEADA was the answer to training for smaller departments, really, because you have the FBI Academy that goes on at Quantico, and that is comprised of leaders in law enforcement, and they go to a course at Quantico for, I think it's about 10 weeks. It's about 10 weeks long. And they go back to the department all jazzed up and learning and really building their toolbox and learning about what type of leader they want to be. And so for smaller departments, it's a lot more difficult to be able to get away to really participate in the FBI Academy at Quantico. And so FBI LEADA has really taken up the charge on that.
That's,
And
that's fascinating, and congratulations again to your great work there. And I think we'll come back to, we want to end, I think, after we get into our drill down on maybe nature versus nurture kind of ideas with respect to criminals and criminal behavior. But we'd like to come back at the end to talk more about what you've been doing for the last 8 years as well, with your coaching, with your books and so forth. But let's drill down, if we could. Let me, I've got a few questions here for you with respect to your opinion about nature versus nurture in human beings, based on your work at the FBI and maybe even your coaching too, to some degree. I don't know. After investigating crime, gangs, corruption, terrorism, and crimes against children for so many years, did you begin to see common patterns in what drives people to commit evil, or did every case seem fundamentally different?
oh yeah, it seemed the cases that I was involved in, it was different. People were involved for different reasons, whether it was for power, whether it was for money, whether it was for control, whether it was for even their ego. It was very different, very, very different. And so people make choices, but they make choices based on what they have in front of them, their access, what they have, who they associate with,
Mm-hmm. So peer
how they,
pressure,
yeah,
peer pressure.
how they determine some of the decisions that they make. And they know, look, the ones that I encountered, they knew they were wrong. They knew that they were out of order in what they were doing. But the juice was worth the squeeze.
If you had to choose, based on your experience, the origin of this criminal behavior and repeated criminal behavior, you would lean towards maybe it's a personal choice versus I'm kind of wired that way from birth?
I would lean more to choice, but I do know, based on my experience and what I've been exposed to, there are just some people out there, something is off kilter in what's going on inside of them mentally. So there are people that This is who they are, this is what they're doing, and this is what they see as the right course of action. And they're really and but then there are those who are they know that it's wrong, but they lean towards how it makes them feel. I know what I'm doing is wrong. I know I'm hurting people, but it makes me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, based on my TV experience of watching various, shows on criminal behavior, and I've watched. My wife hates it, but I watch a lot of Dateline, American Greed. Of course, some of the police stories and investigative stories. But do you think that people kind of get an adrenaline rush from some of this too? Like it's a thrill. I can only relate to like playing sports. Whenever we played sports, and game day was like an adrenaline rush. Hard to explain, but all this you kind of muster up all this force, and you get rewards, mental rewards from, scoring points in games and beating the competition and all that kind of stuff. Do you think some of this is an adrenaline rush for some of these people?
It could be adrenaline, but it's also what they're able to get out of it. If you're someone that all your life you have not had, and you see an opportunity to get more of what you don't have, and that starts to make you feel good, and it's just like I'm gonna tell you, like with drug dealers, let me tell you one thing that I've learned: just one more deal. It was always going to be their last deal. This is my last deal. I'm not going to do it anymore. And then they do it again because of the money, because of how it made them feel, because of what they could do with that money. And they just kept going because this is the thing. They get that money, they spend it, and they don't have any more. And they are not thinking they're not thinking down the road. They're not thinking down range. They're not thinking about, they're not you may have had some that put money away. So when they know, okay, when I'm not going to do this anymore, I'm just going to just live this out. But if that's all they know to do, because see, that's the thing, that money is going to dwindle away. And then if there's well, what am I going to do? Now, while there are plenty things that you can do, they're gonna stay in that space. That this is all I can do.
One of the things I remember my wife mentioning is you talked about TV and the villains and so forth. That was different from my experience growing up in DC. Was the movie and video always made the villains years ago look like villains, and in the real world they don't always. In fact, often they fit in perfectly, and I think that's to me kind of a distinction. I like your view on it. That no, it's not like you might see. It's that in fact that's the challenge, is that they fit in so well. And the point you said, a secondary point, was some of them seem to just almost their core temperament was this disorder. And that's where there could be some things occurring where the biochemistry at birth sets something up that makes it more probable going down this darker road.
I agree. I mean, I can't. Yeah. I mean, and a lot of it is it's access, it's environment, but you can step away from that environment. You don't have to become what your environment says you are. You have that choice. And I do a lot of work with young people. I have I created a youth program through the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and we have a youth leadership conference every year, and that's what I've been getting ready for because it starts next week. And it is about access. I can't tell you how many kids have shared with me and some of the team that they've been told they're not going to amount to anything. They've been told that by people that love them and know them. You're not going to do anything, you're not going to amount to anything. And so you hear that enough, it starts to get in you. And so I'm mindful of it. The committee is mindful of it, that noble youth, that we're the ones that are going to tell them, yes, you can. You can do whatever you want to do. You got to block that noise out. Even though you hear it, it's not true. It's not true.
Well, that gets back to the nurturing versus nature, is your ability to work with that youth and, for lack of a better term, correct the misdirection by the parents or loved ones who told them they were not going to amount to anything.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right? And then you are able to work with them and have, I would presume, better outcomes as a result of that program.
I have a classmate from school that came from being in a gang. I got to go to a private school, and the director was determined to have a mix of kids that kind of came in under a scholarship program, so that there was a diversity of all walks of life in the school. And I did a great interview with him, and he literally was in a gang when he started with the school and had to make a decision. And the principal said, "You're gonna have to make a decision here." If I get a chance, Dana, I'll put in the link below. It's a wonderful story, because I came from a upper middle class, and he came from a pretty extreme environment in DC, and he made the choice, and he did. But you can see that there was that threshold where he may not. And
Right.
And it's just like so many things where, when you look at the brilliance of some of the criminal activity, you go, if you apply this in a constructive way, you get to keep more of the money long term versus a reset when you get caught.
Well, not to mention, you get to live free, you know, and not have to be confined to a jail or a prison cell.
Right.
And, you know, interesting. Now, you mentioned, Rhonda, you mentioned about, like, in some cases, and if you can think of some specific cases you might like to reflect on, that would be interesting. Mental, kind of like, you knew they were off mental health wise, versus criminals versus people who, you know, they seem to be a little more with it mentally, but just made these choices to continue a life of crime. Can you think of any cases that you'd like to, you know, discuss or highlight for us to kind of understand a little bit better about that?
Well, you know what? One case just came to mind, and I thought about it a couple days ago, and it was the Unabomber. And I actually think it's Thomas Moser. He was killed by one of the bombs sent by Ted Kaczynski, and in New Jersey. And I was on the evidence response team at the time. And so I worked that scene. And I thought about what Ted Kaczynski was thinking, what was going through his head. But a lot was going through his head. He was concerned about the environment, and he projected his displeasure on different industries. So people have studied him, people have interviewed him, people have you know, over the years, when, you know, when he was first when he was arrested, different people went on a different take. something, he was mentally disturbed, or no, he was driven by his ideology, how he saw things, how he was concerned about the environment, he was concerned about what was going on around him. And that's why he really he became a recluse. He just, you know, he was in a cabin and he just really cut himself off because he started to see things that he did not like. And he was really trying to get his message out. But the way that he was getting his message out was what made him off mentally. Um, so that's the one case that really just kind of comes to comes to mind.
I had to guess. I would guess that a lot of criminal activity is shut down pretty quickly from incident. But there are some people that are able to evade law enforcement for many, many years. How are they able to do that? I mean, do you think, especially this day and age with technology and tracking devices and all that kind of stuff?
They keep their mouth shut. They keep their mouth shut. Now it's harder now because cameras are everywhere. Um, it's much harder now. The level of surveillance is different. The tools that we have, law enforcement utilizes in order to determine the movements of people. But a lot of it is that they stay to themselves and they keep their mouths shut. They don't engage in a whole lot of people. They don't say a whole lot. They're very, very careful about who they're talking to and what they're saying.
They have a network of people and they talk to certain people that opens up an avenue for disclosure and discovery, it sounds like. And but whereas if they become that recluse hideout in that cabin in Idaho or something like that, middle of nowhere, don't use technology, right, live off the grid, I imagine that's a way to evade law enforcement.
And it's becoming harder. I mean, every day. I mean, the cell phone tracking. I'm also into amateur radio, so I know something about the electronics. It's just like, no, there's a digital foot. It's almost impossible to move through our world and not create a digital footprint.
Right. And so you have people that, I mean, they do things and they're like, okay, eventually I'm gonna get caught, but I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna do as much as I can. And so you have people that have been involved in criminal activity, but they have a separate life. And they're engaged with their kids, they're married, um, and they are really operating at a level, but they're able to separate. They're able to separate what they do criminally to what their lives actually look like.
I'm thinking of that movie, A History of Violence, which was, I thought, a really well done, acting job with, he had a normal life. He had erased his violent history and then was living a normal life. And yeah, so that's what you're pointing out is they have, that's part of their cover, as they step into that other role as a way to protect themselves.
Right. Well, it's Bernie Madoff is a classic example, I think, of what you're talking about, Rhonda. He the big New York City financier who created NASDAQ, had a huge positive reputation on Wall Street for many, many years. And he had this alternate deal going on where on one of the floors of the building that he was working, his office was located in, he had a complete unit dedicated to fabricating financial statements and running a Ponzi scheme, largest one in history at the time. And yet he was a family guy, had a wife, 2 kids. Both his sons worked for him. You may know the story, and but that just incredible alternate reality kind of situation. And when that came down, it came down because in 2008 and 9, when the market crashed, running a Ponzi scheme, people were asking for their money. They wanted to get their money out of the market, and running Ponzi scheme, he had no new money coming in, which is how he was paying these investors a guaranteed rate of return year in, year out. And so, it fell apart. And I don't know if you guys know, but he admitted to his sons initially, is how this came about. The knowledge of this, he admitted to his 2 sons that it was a fraud for all these years. And the sons decided to report him to the FBI. And the FBI came in and worked with SEC and realized this multi-billion-dollar deal where this guy was this pillar of society for all these years. So and there are many other examples. It's interesting how that can happen too, versus the person that you look at and they're a criminal based upon their MS-13 tattoos. So.
Well, yeah, with Bernie Madoff, greed. The money coming in, he's able to, take care of all the different trappings that come with that. It's supporting his wife and his kids. It's so because you don't know Bernie Madoff, you didn't know how, you have to know how he grew up. And it just like his wife. What is it that she wanted? What did she demand of him? And he may have felt like he had to do this in order to make her happy. You just don't know. You really, really, you don't know. But those are the kind of things and those are the kind of questions that you ask. And I know those are the kind of things that you're interested in. What makes people do the things that they do? And what are they willing to admit to? What are they willing to be truthful about? To say why they did it. In order to do that, you really have to know that person. You have to get to know that person. You gotta try and understand their childhood and their exposure and how they grew up, who raised them, all of those kind of things. It's just not about them. You got to look at the people that they were exposed to.
Well, and that's, that gets back to nature versus nurture. And another example that we talked about previously was the famous Whitey am I saying his name right? Bulger?
Whitey Bulger.
Who was on the FBI most wanted list for many years. I think he was evaded law enforcement for some 16 years, and I forget the nature of his crime. So he was a major criminal. All the while, his brother Billy, I think was his name, Bulger, was a state senator, honorable state senator from Massachusetts, and went on to be the president of the University of Massachusetts for many years. 2 brothers, same parents,
same household.
I would suspect it was the same household growing up. 2 totally different paths.
So you have to look at, okay, what's the age difference? What was the access? So I can imagine Whitey Bulger's brother, he may have, even though they grew up in the same household, that brother may have met someone that he was very impressed by, or someone he had access to. So that's why it's so important to know background. It's just like being in relationships. You got to know you got to know background. And then that person has to be willing to open up and share that background, to be open and honest with themselves, to understand why they are who they are. And that's why I love this work. I love leadership. I love, understanding who I am and who I was and how I've shifted, how I've transitioned. That maintaining that level of emotional intelligence and really understanding what that looks like. And I just love it. I just love it. And so it's important, particularly in law enforcement, to really understand that because of the level of engagement officers have with the public. They have to understand that how the public views them and how they see them, and they have to understand that when they're coming with their uniform and coming with all the stuff all the things that they have to understand that they don't see who they actually are. They see the outside, and what they see, it causes them to be nervous. It causes them to levels of anxiety. It causes all different emotions in different people. And so that's where law enforcement is very, very important to be very intentional about understanding emotional intelligence and understanding who they are.
I'm sure you heard recently of Raleigh on the 4th of July had thousands of youth taking over streets. I don't know I think it got national news. And
Yes.
one thing you don't know is I have a men's book that came out last year, and it's my perspective on the socialization that supports men to mature and how most of it's absent. And this is something that's come top of mind in our city, and I think I'd love to hear your perspective on it, because it's a wave going throughout the U.S. that I personally predicted 10 years ago when I was working on it. Took 17 years for me to finish the book. Taboo, The Lost Codes of Men is the name of the book. And this was like, this is going to happen. If we don't get more engagement with these kids, more activities going on, it's just going to be natural. And I just know enough, even though I was in a good middle class family, I knew enough. I went to a boys' school in downtown Washington called Woodward School for Boys, and there were enough kids involved in trouble. I could see how seductive it was. It was exciting, and it was, and one of them was really good at stealing things from stores, and one was actually good at robbing. I think they robbed a whole Sears, and the excitement. I really can put myself in the shoes of how, in a different world, I could have been more sucked into it because then occurred. And the importance of the social structure, if enough of it's missing, it almost creates an environment for this. And I said 10 years ago, we're creating a field of potential problems where young people are going to go, oh, hey, a place to go, cause trouble. It's something to do. And love to hear your perspective on that, of where are the directions. One of my views, I interviewed the former Wake County sheriff, is his point is you have to have both enough police and active mental health people in numbers just to start building relationships, is a takeaway from him. But I'd love to hear your views on that.
Well, from my perspective, and working with young people for years, more than 25 years, and I've been coaching, even though I started my business in 2018. I was coaching before 2012 when I got my certification. So I've been coaching and mentoring is one of my superpowers. And so in my engagement with young people, you got to give them something different. You got to give them something different. And so if you don't have a lot for them to do, you don't have places for them to go where they could figure out who they are, they're going to follow because those takeovers, the messaging gets out. And so I try not to be critical of law enforcement when it because immediately I'm like, how come nobody knew this? How come nobody was able to get out in front? Because they get the word out. And so it's important for law enforcement to stay in tuned to what young people are talking about. Because a lot of times they tell you stuff and they don't know that they telling you stuff that you'll be able to use in order to get out in front of some of the mess that they're involved in. Because the word got out for those kids to know to take over.
Mhm.
Social media, right?
Exact social media, but what platform are they on?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because see, kids, just like when you remember I mentioned don't in order to commit criminal activity, you don't want to be detected, keep your mouth shut. Don't tell nobody. Well, see, they tell people.
Mhm.
Mhm.
They tell. They get the word out. They spread it. So law enforcement has to make that connection to get to find out, okay, what are they doing? Where are they going? What are they involved in? And so it takes, and see, that's the challenge with some young people. If their parents are not paying attention to them, then the parents are going to miss it. And you have parents that are okay with their kids being out of the house. They don't know what they're doing. They have no idea, and they are worn low. You have single mothers, you have single fathers that are really carrying the load. And sometimes they just want to sit down somewhere and just have some peace. So when the kids are quiet, when they have their devices, they're good. Parents are good. But see, this is the problem. They forget what those devices do. I see it all the time in restaurants. Kids come in there with their tablets and they sit down and then that's what they do. They're looking at cartoons or they're just on social media like the little kids. And it really depends on, a lot of times what they're looking at is mind numbing. It's not doing anything for their minds, for their thought processes. It's not doing anything. Not doing anything at all.
That's why I think it's the old it takes a village to correct this problem, not just one thing. We need the parents, we need the schools, we need I have to tell you a story growing up in a Woodward school for boys. We one time acted up at lunch and we had a teacher, we called him Isaac Hayes behind his back. He was this tall distinguished guy with bald head, and he said, when we go back, I'm getting the 2x4. Now we can't do that anymore, but we had consequences. And this was so brilliant, Rhonda. He lined us up in a way where the most squeamish boy was first and the toughest at the back. So by the time he had paddled the first two that were bawling on the floor, the toughest kids were just mellow. And he said, if anyone acts up in the future, it happens again. We were straight the whole rest of the year. So we have a real problem because I'm not condoning that behavior, but I'm
Right.
really worried we don't even have fundamental consequences and anymore. And there's so much terror of stepping over the line of a consequence. I don't know what to do, what advice to give a parents. That transformed an entire room of teenage boys for the entire rest of the class. And all I had to say is he had that board sitting on the wall.
So the key thing is to have the conversation about the consequences. What are the consequences? What shows up? Because that's what we talk about in Noble Youth. I give you a perfect example. One of the things that we really going to go deep on is how they look, how they show up. So I give you a perfect example. I remember you'll have someone show up for an interview And if you are adverse to socks, certain type of socks, and if you allow that to affect your decision or sway you, you're not going to tell that person why they were swayed to not consider you for a position because it doesn't sound good. I didn't like you because of your socks, but that's why they didn't like them. And so, just like for young people, when they don't dress to interviews, they don't show up decent and in order. People don't have to tell you you don't look good. They're not going to tell you that. And in some respects, they cannot. They're not going to tell you. But that's why you weren't hired. And so they have to understand that it's not because they're not able to do the job, it's because of how you showed up. Because no one is going to want to look at that while they're at work. Well, I mean,
That's
so that's why it's important. We got to be straight talk, no chaser with young people. You got to tell it like it is. And
We may not
that's
be able
one
to
of the
use a
things
2x4,
we
but
do.
we could show them a picture of a baseball bat or something, right?
Well, no, I think there's something gold you said, but also I think someone like yourself with the years of experience brings a credibility and authority that communicates at a nonverbal level to be able to reach them. So I don't think, me stepping into your role would be the same thing with my years of experience in that as yours, because you've got stories and experience to draw on that would get their attention. And I think it's a combination of the perfect thing. But yeah, consequences seem to be absent. And there's my friend who's done a lot of work on men and grief. Says there's a study that when you say Johnny can't have his cake until he eats his vegetables, if he then is able to get the cake before the vegetables, the fundamentals of compassion don't develop, because that fundamental causes you to look from another person's eyes. So if we don't have all those fundamentals occurring at home, and many times, like you said, maybe the parent cares, but they're just so overwhelmed they have no bandwidth to do it. So it's not just they don't want to do it, they just it's beyond their bandwidth. We all know what that's like.
Exactly.
And then in Raleigh, my concern right now, there's a candidate I'm working with, is when you have not enough police, all they're doing is putting out fires, because in the amateur radio, we have scanner observed, they're just firefighting all the time, emergency fires. Well, it's hard to kind of build a relationship with the youth when you're underwater with fundamental calls that are occurring. So that's another thing in going into small towns I experienced, is really talking to people that had far less than me. None of them want less police. They want support. They want mental health. They want all of the above, which is, not assuming I know. So I think you're right. We all have to go, what is our part to help change this? Because it's going to affect everyone. And this happened in Raleigh, I think, is a good wake-up call, because it was now in areas that crime normally doesn't exist. And that's unfortunately what usually it takes, Rhonda, to get people's attention. If it's crime in a tougher area, the majority of people with influence don't notice. But when it comes into their neighborhood, they start paying attention. That's why I think is a positive of what this is.
My work with the Noble Youth, the Noble Youth Program, I've raised the money for the conference. It's a leadership conference. We are not playing basketball. We're not running around. We're not doing any of that stuff. Those kids can do those things when they're at home. That's not what they're in workshop. And do you know it's a struggle for me to raise the money? It is a struggle. It's a struggle that sometimes I don't understand. And these are people that have money. They have the access. So I try my best to position myself, because this is to connect with the people that do have the money. Because this conference costs money, but it's a free conference. Because kids don't have money. That's one of the things that blocks their access. That's one of the things that keeps them from learning. It keeps them from going higher because they do not have access. So over at Noble, we make sure that they have access. But in trying to make sure they have access, it is hard. Trying to drum up support. And so trying to connect with people that outwardly, that I see, like entertainers, sports figures, folk like that, that, they got a little something.
Right.
This is a
Right.
good tax write-off for them.
Right. A good check for you would be like, oh, I missed an extra day on vacation.
Yeah. And so, and and nobody gets paid. That's the other piece. This is all volunteer driven. I started this program 25 years, and I thank God that it's still going on because of the young people that we've impacted. But it's hard. People talk about loving kids, but they don't want to invest in the programs that help them.
Well, perhaps philanthropics and foundations too. Maybe that's an avenue for getting some of that money. I think, especially with these teen takeovers, now would seem to be a great time to really leverage that, for lack of a better term, in terms of highlighting, where things are going and why that money is necessary to support your leadership program.
Well, and that's the point, that the value of events like this, the horrible tragedy, 8,000, but when the crime goes into areas we don't expect, that's when the crack occurs, because human nature is human nature. It's like, until it's in my lap, I don't care. It's awful. It's the dark side of human nature. But when it starts showing up in your lap, you might start caring. So that's what my point was. Some of these events, though tragic, have been a wake-up call that maybe we all need to do more to help out with it, like your program.
Right. And see, this is the thing. It doesn't. One of the things that I try to do. Okay, I have friends that I know they got some coin, and so I'm comfortable in. Look, I jack them up. I'm like, write a check. Stop
Right.
playing. Don't get any shoes. You don't need those shoes. You don't need that handbag. You don't need that suit. These kids need you. So that's how I go at them. And so they write a check. But when you start talking about the dollars, because it costs money to put on a quality event, I don't put no shady stuff together. The kids get a t-shirt every day, they get a conference bag, just like any adult conference that you will go to. I make sure those kids they have that same experience.
Isn't that great?
That is that sounds like a fantastic
program. I mean, that's the type of...
It is.
That's the type of thing that changes a child's life. And you and I have seen, I've talked to many people who've turned their life around. In fact, often it's the entrepreneur that I meet that's the most successful survived a childhood I couldn't have survived. Not from an entitled family, survived. And it was often like one teacher or one mentor or the neighbor who showed them how to fix a car, or something small like that can be a tipping point in a young person's life. And you don't know what that will be. And your conference could be just that. It's like, I didn't even know. In fact, my friend, they did a thing with youth in DC where they took them out to camping in cabins where it was total darkness. And they had some of the toughest kids from a bad neighborhood that were terrified in total darkness, and they knew what they were doing. I'm sure that profoundly changed some of those lives, just that getting out in the wilderness. So something like your event where they go, this is what a normal, you get together and make money, and you don't let it be lost by getting arrested or something, and what you can have.
Oh yes, it is all about exposing them. And that's why it does. I have to be straight talk, no chaser, and honest. It gets frustrating for me to get connected with people and have that conversation, and I'm like, I know you can write a check. I know you can show up. And I've we've gotten real successful in getting close to celebrities over the years, but lately those celebrities say you got to pay me. You got to write a check. And I'm like, "Dang, these kids, it's free for them. We don't get paid. We begging to make sure we're able to do this thing, and you want to get paid to talk to kids. Get out of here. I don't know. We don't want you in front of our kids. What about grants and philanthropic organizations? You still have to have access to get into those because they get thousands and thousands of packets every day of people. But I can tell you, somebody, chances are, I can't say definitively, but chances are there's an advocate somewhere within that organization that says, you know what, write them a check.
Tell us, be thinking about telling us about your current speaking, your books, etc. How people can get in touch with you. I know you're living, I believe, in the Tampa Bay area. A little bit of that. Let's end on that. But what my observation was, I want to go back to how fabulous your personal story and journey has been, that you highlighted at the beginning of this podcast, talking about how you finished a college degree and you were appointed as a switchboard operator at the FBI. That's how you started, and how you felt about that, how your mom reframed things for you, and look at how your career zoomed. And look at the blessings that came out of that you did not expect. Communication skills, ability. You talk to some of the most influential people in government, okay? And then these all things I know today help you in your career, that beginning. And I want to emphasize for young people that are struggling to find entry-level jobs, do something, okay? And I'll just tell you a quick story. I've been helping, not too long ago, I helped do some recruitment for engineers. And we submitted different candidates for engineering roles, happen to be up in Pittsburgh. And some of the feedback I got in one case, yeah, great skills, looks like a good candidate. We like her because she learned how to run forklift and how to use a jackhammer to get a project done as an intern. Another comment, we like this guy because he worked on a farm as a kid. Now, what's that got to do with college degrees? Right. But these are the things that hiring managers look for.
Yeah.
The fact that you paid your penance, you will, as you, like you did, the fact that these kids do this, those are things that they can do now, okay, to be more attractive candidates, differentiate themselves from other candidates with some of these entry-level roles.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's the exposure. It really is. It's the exposure. It's opening that door and helping them see, being that mentor. Now, I remember I mentioned to you earlier how mentoring is my superpower, and I do view it as that I'm so blessed. I'm blessed by God to really, really love that space, mentoring, because I use my experiences that over my life to help young people understand This is what you need, because it's lost on them. They don't know what to do. There are people out there that don't know what to do. They don't know where to turn based on what they've learned and what they've seen thus far. I'll give you a perfect example. I run into people all the time. Oh, I always wanted to be an FBI agent. I just didn't know what to do. And I don't say, I'm like, and I'm saying to myself, how you don't know what to do? How you don't know? I'm just saying it because I don't want them to feel some kind of way. How you don't know what to do? And so I help them. I recognize that it's about access. I recognize it's about who's in their circle and what they've been told. Because they may have mentioned it to somebody and someone say, "Oh, no, you can't do that. Why would you want to do that? You can't do that." So that shuts them down. But inside, right here, that dream is still there. So they keep living, they keep doing what they're doing, and they don't take the steps to figure out what they can do next. Because I was not recruited by the FBI. I was never recruited. I saw the FBI. The way I was introduced to the FBI was through media. Nobody talked to me about the FBI. Nobody, no, no. That's how I was exposed to the FBI. And it stayed with me throughout my childhood.
Excellent.
That is fabulous. And wrapping up here, um, the it seems to me that this idea we talked about, nature versus nurture with criminal behavior and so forth, this is the nurture part where you can move the needle on some of these kids that otherwise would be maybe leading towards a life of crime. So I think that's very exciting to think about, in the work that we're doing, putting together kind of like how it helps our thought process too in our next piece of work. But tell us, let's finish up with about you, the additional parts of you with your speaking, your books, how people can get in touch with you, if they'd like to book you for speaking, if they'd like to contribute to your leadership program, et cetera, buy your book. Tell us about all that.
Well, you can check out my website, RhondaMGlover.com. You can reach out to me through my website. Send me a message. I do have a new book coming out. I'm so excited about that. It's called Ascending to Leadership: Strategies I Learned from More Than 30 Years as an FBI Agent. I'm very excited about that. That's going to be coming out super, super soon. And I talk about, I just talk about my life and talk about the experiences that I've had and how they shaped me into who I am. And I talk about my coaching and my mentoring and my FBI career. And through all the work that I've done with Noble, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, if anyone's interested in reaching out, you can reach out to me through my website, and we could kind of connect and talk offline about that as well. That's my volunteer. I've been a Noble member since I started in the early '80s before I became an agent, and I've been associated with Noble ever since. Really garnering significant mentors out of that organization, which led me to other law enforcement organizations where I grabbed onto other mentors. So it's I've been blessed to have some incredible people in my life, but it's about really taking hold of those opportunities and really positioning and really paying attention to those that are really, really there to help you and they care about you. And you can tell when somebody care about you and they love you. You can tell. You know how it makes you feel.
Yeah,
That's the key point
that
there.
is super. That
That's
is
great.
super.
This is terrific. Thank you. I'm excited. We'll have the links below of your websites and resources. And thanks for all you're doing. I mean, this is really relevant, and it's what we need to me, a top priority is our youth. If we aren't addressing these now, we're all going to pay more, all personally pay more in the future. And it's,
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I love talking about leadership. So if folks need somebody to come in and talk about leadership, I can do that. I love that. And so that's another thing that I learned during my time. I didn't like getting in front of people talking.
yeah, yeah, I understand. That's fantastic. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reese.
Yeah, that was
Rhonda,
great.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.